Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to do a video recommending true crime. If you're new to my channel, I do read a lot of true crime as well as horror and thrillers, and so if that sounds good, I hope you stick around and subscribe. I've done a video like this once before several years ago, and I will reluctantly link it in the cards and description box. That video was more focused on where to start with true crime, but this one is intended for people that are either new to the genre or people that are just simply looking for more true crime books to pick up. And I should say that you're going to notice as you go through my list that I definitely have a preference for a certain type of true crime. So it tends to be shorter, more narratively driven, and for the most part, more modern. So you're not going to see a lot of the classics on my list, but I figure those are ones that you're probably already aware of, and hopefully some of these will be a little more underhyped and ones that I can help you put on your radar. All that being said, let's get started. Now, the first book I want to recommend is Chase Darkness with Me by Billy Jensen, and this is written by a true crime writer who specifically focuses on unsolved mysteries. He actually explains in his book that it's much more popular to write about solved cases because people, often coming from fiction, do expect there to be an ending to their stories. However, he purposely writes about stories that are cold cases and unsolved because he's hoping that by giving light to them, by putting them out in the media, he will help hopefully to solve some of those cases. And his book is generally a list of various stories, and of course when I'm saying stories I mean based off of true events, where he is recounting times where he put stories out to the media and then assisted often in solving them. So what he does as a modern true crime writer is he gets assistance from Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, and really uses crowdsourcing to help identify victims and perpetrators. And I thought the book was incredibly fascinating because of the fact that it focuses so much on the responsibility of regular citizens and doing their part and really participating in these kind of call outs that the police do regularly, saying, have you seen this man? Have you seen someone with this description following this event, etc. And this book got me so motivated for me to look at ways that I can help to volunteer in my own community in order to assist the police forces, because I've always have been someone who's wanted to be an amateur detective. I've always loved to read mysteries, things like that, and I really like that at the end of this book he gives really tangible steps how you also can do the same. And so if you can't tell, I really enjoyed this one. I do want to mention that this is the same author that helped to finish off I'll Be Gone in the Dark, the iconic true crime book that I'm sure you know I recommended in my last video, which is why I'm not going to talk about it again here. But if you enjoyed that one, I really think you'll enjoy this one as well. And while it is not focused on the Golden State Killer, it does make references to that case, so it's definitely a good one to read after reading that one. So highly recommend. Next, I want to recommend The Killer Across the Table by John E. Douglas and Mark Oschlacker. And this is written by the same authors that wrote Mindhunters, which of course got turned into a Netflix show. And there is of course an original book called Mindhunter, and I'll be honest, I found that book to be a little bit dry and dense for my personal taste, but since then they have written a follow-up book, and this one I think is much more focused or targeted at the audience of true crime that is myself, basically those that are looking for a little bit more of a narrative and just reading a bit more like fiction. So this is a collection of several cases that they went through, and specifically where the book focuses is on the profile of the killers in their story. So I need to give huge warnings that there are some really dark and disturbing cases that they're going to discuss. All of the content warnings you can expect, so be warned, be aware of that. It's not going to be for everyone. But the first case especially really grabbed my attention, and several of the other cases I thought were quite fascinating as well. And what this book does is it really highlights the criminology and the psychology behind analyzing someone's behavior, their motivations for the crimes, all of that. I used to want to be a criminologist and kind of still wish I had done that. And this book really reunited my love for that area of science and psychology, and I just highly recommend this book. I think it's very palatable, very easy to read. It's not a really long, and I just flew through it. I thought it was super fascinating, so I hope you enjoy it as well. Next, I want to talk about American Predator by Maureen Callahan, which is a true crime account of a woman who was kidnapped in Alaska and taken away. The investigators follow the case and soon enough realize that the person who is responsible for this is possibly a serial killer, that this is not the first time he has stolen someone away, and has a whole history of that. So the first part of the book is focused on the kidnapping, tracking down what happened to this woman, where did she go, and then the later part of the book is more focused on the individual himself, the perpetrator to this act, and you find out that he is a very dark and disturbing man. Now, I'll admit that I am someone who loves kidnapping stories. I do realize it's very strange to say that in a true crime case, but those are the kind of mystery and thriller books that I'm attracted to. So the subject matter really held my attention. I wanted to know what happened to the woman. I found it very suspenseful, and I don't want to spoil anything, but I will say that I didn't find the second half quite as interesting because I got so attached to the kidnapping case. But the second half of the book is still really compelling. If you're someone who loves to study a killer, let to see their motivations and just get to see what is the makings of someone like that, then I think you'll really enjoy the entire book. I didn't dislike the second part, I just wanted more of the kidnapping story, which is, like I said, more the beginnings of the story. So highly recommend it. Definitely, once again, very dark and disturbing. All the content warnings, so go in knowing what you're getting yourself into, but I do recommend it for sure. Next, I want to talk about A Daughter's Deadly Deception by Jeremy Grimaldi. This is a Canadian true crime account of a young woman who supposedly was involved in a home invasion where her parents were shot and killed and she was tied up but left alive. However, as the case begins to unspiral, and this is not a spoiler, it's right in the premise of the book, you realize that she was not the victim but rather the perpetrator, and she was responsible for designing this situation to kill her own parents. Now, this is a fascinating Canadian true crime account that I think is just a really compelling story, and personally I picked it up because I just wanted to know how in the world someone would do that to their own parents. And I think that the case itself is very interesting, but the way that it's portrayed in this book is a little bit dry. So of all the books I'm going to mention here, I'll say that this one is probably the least accessible to those of you that more read fiction, because there is a lot of detail, especially involving the second half of the book where it's more focused on the trial. And it did get a little bit dense for me, just a little bit overly detailed and a little bit exhaustive. But if you're just interested in that case, if you just want to know more about why that woman did what she did, you might want to check this one out. It's definitely an interesting one for sure. After that, I want to talk about The Babysitter by Liza Rodman, and this is about a young woman who finds out that the person who was one of her babysitters growing up over the course of several summers at the beach turned out to be a serial killer. And so this story is told after the fact, as she is recounting her childhood and recounting her experiences with this individual. So the story is broken up into two different perspectives, one being her telling her story growing up, and the other one is interspliced with actual account of what the serial killer did to the people that he victimized. Now, I want to be clear right off the bat that the author is clear from the get-go that she herself was not a victim. She did not experience any sort of act or anything as a child that made her realize what this person actually was. And so it's only after the fact, when it all came out in the press, that she realized what had happened. So instead, this is more a study of what seemed like a normal relationship, but then gone through the lens of knowing what he did. You know, you do kind of look at it in a second light, and so I think it's really fascinating. I actually found her childhood more fascinating than the chapters just focused on what he did. Certainly he did some despicable things, and it really goes through his childhood and upbringing and kind of what led him down the path that he went down. But I actually really preferred the chapters about this young woman because you find out that she had a very, very difficult relationship with a very troubling mother, and that actually ended up grabbing my attention even more. So I would recommend this true crime book to people that, of course, love serial killer stories and love the idea of, well, what if your neighbor or your babysitter was a serial killer and you just didn't know it? How would that feel after the fact? And it's more the idea than actual any crime happening. But at the same time, you need to be okay that a lot of this book is really focused on the mother and daughter relationship, which I found personally really fascinating, but does kind of distract away from that true crime aspect. So if that sounds good to you, I do recommend this one. I found it very compelling and I just flew through it very quickly. It is short and concise and gets to the point, and I really did like it. Finally, I want to recommend Murder in the Family by Jeff Blackstock, and this is a story of a family where the father worked as a Canadian ambassador working abroad, and he took his family with him. However, along the way, his wife got very sick and died under mysterious circumstances. Now, years later, the story is written and told from the perspective of the children, who are revisiting their mother's mysterious death and are putting together the clues and realize that their father was almost certainly responsible for their mother's death, that he basically murdered her. Now, again, this is a story where that setup is all disclosed in the premise, the back of the book. I'm not spoiling anything. You're going to know it right from the prologue what you're getting yourself into. The authors do note the fact that there is no hard evidence or conclusion at the end of the story, so meaning that no one goes to jail at the end of this and nothing is truly proven in the court of law. But they do provide a lot of very compelling circumstantial evidence that, for me personally, told a really compelling narrative, and I certainly do believe the story that they told is definitely a version of what really happened. It was so compelling. I flew through this book in just a couple of days because I just could not stop reading. So this is one of those books that is technically, of course, true crime, but reads like fiction because you just want to know what's happening next. There is a lot of focus on the family and their upbringing, and I just found every little detail to be oh so fascinating. And certainly the authors do make some assumptions about their childhood because they're piecing together things after the fact. And there were a few details that I kind of questioned, that I felt like they made some maybe excessive leaps and bounds, but the general gist of the story worked so well. The pieces came together and you just realize this horrifying story. So if you're looking for one that, in my opinion, is a little bit more underhyped, I highly recommend this true crime book. I loved it. I'm still thinking about it today, and it's definitely one I'll revisit because it's just such an incredible story, such a horrifying, sad story. But wow, I cannot believe a family went through what they did. So that is it. We've made it to the end of the video, and I'd love to hear down below if you're planning on picking up any of the books I mentioned here, and I'd also love your recommendations for your favorite true crime books, especially if you have any that you think that I would personally be interested in. Again, those that are a little bit more narratively driven, like the ones I discussed. If you're new to my channel, again, consider subscribing. I do read a lot of horror thrillers as well as adult science fiction and fantasy. You can help me out by sharing this video around online with your true crime friends, giving it a thumbs up, and if you hit that notification bell, you'll never miss a video from me. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.